Welcome everyone. Today we have another new episode, and I know that many of our audience they communicate with me that why I cannot arrange the yesterday session. I'm really sorry about that because of electricity problem and internet related problem. Suddenly it's happened. I'm really sorry, but hopefully with the contributions of our guest, we have our a very important guest today joins Dr. William. I think previously he joined with the story of White House and everybody know about him. We have our very good friend, Mr. Jem Eid. He has a very good foundation, Jem Eid Foundation. We have our another friend, Mr. Alex. So let's start the discussions about the decent working and economical development. Dr. William, you are very experienced and you have a lot of experience from uh, uh, policy, politics, and many interesting things. So USA, like at present, they are transforming their power and everything. And we observe your show, especially we observe your analysis on politics and everything. So creating job is a very important for the politicians.
Right.
Uh, and yes, and now USA have many challenging things, especially the COVID and new government come, and you are very close to I want to say as a Democrat analyst, I saw that you are very effective before the elections. So what your analysis, what will be the next strategy for USA next 3 to 5 years?
Oh, okay. Well, that's actually a pretty broad kind of question. I appreciate it, and I'll get to that in a second. But first, I think for purposes of our audience, what I'd like us to do is I'd like us to think about it as two different ways. First, the challenges that America is going to be facing and will be facing are going to be separate than the challenges that developing nations are facing and have historically faced. And so, in that, there's really going to be two different types of discussions. But I'll begin with what the United States is looking at. Essentially, the best way I can explain it is that the American economy has stalled. So it's in a holding pattern. And right now, if I were to take the analogy of an engine, we need a spark plug in order to get things going. And essentially, understanding the dynamics of an economy is that businesses will produce products that people will buy. Well, right now, because people have lost their jobs, they don't have the money to buy the products that companies are producing. So therefore, the companies are producing less products. And because they're producing less products, they need less workers. And because they have less workers, there are more people that have less jobs. And because they have less jobs, they can't purchase. And so what you need something to break this cycle. And that is normally, when we talk about governmental influence and the governmental policy, is what we call stimulus. So the government comes up with a program where they either through loans, through employment programs, through support packages, and through grants, get people back to work and or give them money so that they can then begin to purchase goods and materials. And when that happens, when they start to purchase, the businesses then begin to produce the goods and materials that the people need. And that breaks the cycle and starts the whole cycle moving forward. So what we're facing right now, given the trifecta, which is the pandemic on the economy, which obviously we have to cure, as does the world, as well as, at least here, and also throughout the world, the social crisis. What you have here is that, at least over the short term, in the United States, the federal government is going to have to take an activist role in terms of propping up and supporting, through loans and monetary and fiscal policy, businesses so that they can hire people. And then once the people are hired, they will then begin to spend, and that will start the American economy. Now, generally, why it's important for your audience is that the American economy is the world's largest economy, and as such, it represents the spark plug for the world economy, because the United States is the largest consumer of goods and services that are made across the world. And so obviously, if America is not purchasing, then the rest of the world is not producing. So by getting the American economy, the American engine running again, that will then spur the need and the demand for goods and services for across the world, which should be the spark plug for the economies across the globe.
Mhm. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Jemmy. Like you have a very good relationships and contribution in developing an economy, and you live in Silicon Valley. How do you want to share your experience with our audience, especially when we think and we are making strategy for innovative economy? Because there is no choice right now in the COVID situations. We have many things happening. So, how do you want to share your things with us?
Thank you, Sharif, for that opportunity. And that was a very eloquent and concise explanation of what's going on in the United States right now. And I would like to expand on that just a little bit to say that people my age in the United States were promised the American dream. If you worked hard, you would be able to own your own home. You would be able to retire in relative comfort, all of these things. And when they get to be my age, they find out that that's not true. So there's the reaction to this is one is denial, something's not right here. Another is blame. And right now we're in the stage where we're blaming others for the problems that the American dream that was promised to us is not being achieved, not actualized. So there's a lot of division in the country because of these promises that were really, to many people, broken. So they want to know who broke it. And so we're in not only do we have a pandemic, not only do we have an economic slump, but we have a crisis in society right now where trust has broken down. Everyone wants to blame someone else for their problems. Now, how we solve this problem, I think the idea of the engine and breaking the cycle is exactly what you have to do. And the way the government can make a difference in this is what you just touched on, innovation. Now, there's two types of labor that we have, and one is the labor you do with your back, and the other is the types that you do with your brain. And what we can do instantaneously, in which we should have been doing for many years now, is investing in infrastructure where people can build things. Our bridges are in disrepair. Our airports are way behind other countries' airports. We can rebuild this infrastructure, put people to work doing that. Now, it is not in the interest of a company to do this. It has to be a government project. So right off the bat, what we should do is invest in our infrastructure, put people to work rebuilding it, making it first world capable. And it is not today. Bridges are collapsing. People are having difficulties getting from place to place because the infrastructure is not functioning now. Make it functional again. Put people to work to make this happen. Now, the other idea is what do we do with our brains? So we think about, in Silicon Valley, we think about computers and the internet and all of this. And so we think sometimes about computer programming. Well, it's not just computer programming. Computer programming is, an important part of it, but it's just a part of it. There's all sorts of things. For example, right now what you're doing is you're producing content and you're distributing it to all these viewers that are watching us now. So that takes a lot of different components to put that together. There has to be the background work to make the production possible. There has to be the people with the content that they want to share. There has to be the people that share it. And there are a lot of jobs that are possible to communicate and to educate along these ways. And this is what the EAT Foundation is trying to do into remote areas, is to educate, provide an education so that people can become more capable of providing for themselves. And our restriction right now is internet connectivity, the broadband access. So why don't we just work on that? Why don't we try to provide that internet access to people who do not have it now, where we can then provide them with the information they need, the education that they need to become self-sustaining. And this is what I think we have not been doing and we need to do, and I'm moderately hopeful that we will.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Alex, you are actually activist for global warming issues and this kind of things, and you are doing very interesting job. And we want to give you thanks, special thanks from my core of my heart, because how you join in our session, this is really, really difficult. But you every time you join, and this is very early in the morning in USA. I want to give special thanks to you. So beside that, like what you're guidelines for developing nations, how they can develop different kind of job opportunity for the youth, especially for this green technologies and friendly business and this kind of things. What your observation and what your guideline for that?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, again, I apologize. I have bad internet where I live. Even I live in a nice house, but it's just bad internet. So I got to come into town and use my cellular connectivity. And just what James is saying, it's so important for everyone to have access to internet. And me coming all the way down here to do this project is a good example of that. Just I wouldn't be able to do it at my home, so it's really limiting. Again, to expand on what James was saying, he's breaking down in the economy or work into two different categories, using your mind and using your back. There's a couple of other additional main categories when you're thinking about jobs and job creation. It has to do with goods and services. Are you providing a good or are you providing a service? That's another way to choose how we want to create more jobs. Do we want to create more things, or do we want to create more services to help people? So we are transitioning into a global shift, and we have been towards renewable energies. There's new huge sectors of job creations with solar technology, wind energy, geothermal, more energy and attention being directed towards tidal energy, as well as renewable resources. Because right now we're extracting resources from Earth beyond Earth's ability to replenish or recharge those resources. We're extracting water from aquifers beyond their ability to recharge. We're cutting down trees beyond their ability to regrow. We're mining minerals and for concrete, for sand, and everything beyond Earth's ability. And we're now seeing those consequences throughout throughout different countries around the world, as far as ecosystem collapses and different disruptions we're seeing in the planet's biosphere. So there's a huge shift towards new products that have to do with sourcing materials that are sustainable. I personally like supporting the organization. It's FSC. It stands for Forest Stewardship Council. It's a big organization that makes sure that we're planting new trees to replenish the trees that we're extracting. There's a lot of I would recommend checking out their website and some of the resources. So every time I buy a pencil, a notepad, or lumber from the hardware store, I make sure that it has that certification. There's a lot of good organizations that we want to support that are overlooking the companies and what we're extracting. So I'd recommend doing more research in that to make sure that we're living sustainable. So again, there's this huge shift globally towards sustainability, and it's going to continue in the future. So if you're ahead of the curve, if you start doing the research, the studying, and the investing towards that direction, there's going to be job security in the future. Infrastructure, like James was mentioning, is also very important. We not only have bridges collapsing around the world, we're going to continue to see, specifically in the United States, we're going to continue to see deterioration of all of the pipes and the plumbing around the world, because the majority of it was installed decades ago. So that will start breaking down. So there is going to be new jobs in the whole water sectors and water transportation sectors. So that's important to know. So the shift that's happening globally is not only happening globally, this major shift towards renewable energies and sustainable products. There's a huge shift also happening because of the pandemic. So there's people that spent their entire college career learning maybe how to do tattoos or to work in a hair salon. So there's a lot of jobs that are being disrupted right now because of the pandemic. So as a society, we have to adapt to keep those people employed and to transition. So there's a lot of jobs. This pandemic's not going away in a month. It might not go away in a year. So instead of just continuing to hold on to those jobs, keep trying for those jobs, we have to adapt. People have to adapt and start diversifying how they make money and the economy to keep the economy running. And there's a lot of ways to do that. It takes personal initiative. It takes educating yourself. Creating jobs or personal education is important, but also just being proactive, making a list of things to do, organizing your life, making a mind map of all this stuff. And if you don't know what a mind map is, they're really useful, really helpful. I would just do some keyword searches in Google. Go to Google Images. Mind maps are how you can lay out your life and you can narrow down what jobs you want to do, because it's so important to, live a good life and be successful and have a good job. So I hope I answered your question, and thank you.
Yes.
For the
Yes.
response.
Thank you. Dr. William. Yes.
Yes, actually, what I'd like to do is I just want to pick up on what both Alex and James alluded to and highlighted. Earlier, when I was talking about the major structural stuff, what they are focusing in on is, and what our audience needs to remember, they're drilling down into what it actually means. And so when you start talking about what policies and how the government can be effective, these are a number of ways. And that is the leveraging of public dollars in investment. So, for example, for every, say, federal dollar or governmental dollar that they invest in infrastructure, whether it's the roads, the pipes, curbs, or whatever the infrastructure is, that tends to have a multiplier effect throughout the economy. Now, Alex in particular points out, as well as Jim, and Jim, I'll get back to you in just 1 second, but right now, Alex, you get, because you're doing yeoman's work out there in the parking lot, I got to tell you. The thing is that what Alex was talking about is that we have a unique opportunity. Certainly, we are in the midst of a challenge right now, but we have a unique opportunity because we understand the power of leveraging federal dollars. However, today we can leverage those same dollars, obtain that multiplier effect, but do it in a much more responsible way. That is environmentally friendly, sustainable efforts, whether it's renewable energy or renewable harvesting. And that is a distinct opportunity that we have today, given the developments that we've made as a nation and as a world that we didn't have before. And so that is really key and critical, because it's not just leveraging the money, it's where, how, and under what circumstances we do that. Now, getting back to Jim, and Jim, this is a point that I'd like you to kind of expand on in a second, and that is this, is that there are efforts right now, private efforts, to increase the reach of internet around the globe. We have that with the Starlink program and any number of other things. But what we find is, and this is the other thing with regard to leveraging federal dollars, and it doesn't matter which nation. So it can be in Malaysia, it can be India, it can be the United States. But leveraging federal dollars in investment to increase interconnectivity has a quadruple multiplier effect, because it unleashes creativity. And what both Alex and Jim were talking about, there are goods and there are services, but unleashing the power of untapped creative minds through the connectivity of the internet is the way to go. Jim?
Well, thank you, Bill. William, I think this is one of the things we want to concentrate on, is the connectivity, because, we all try to do the best, but we all do our best when we do it together. And a wise man once told me, you need at least three minds, because, if you're just doing it your way, it's not going to work. And if you just have one guy to bounce it off, it's not going to work. You need at least three. And so you have to have this connectivity, so that people have to be able to collaborate. And if they collaborate, then you get an optimal outcome, something close to the optimal. And if they do not collaborate, you will always end up with a suboptimal outcome. So this is I think, a fundamental part of what we're facing in this new global environment. We must be connected, and how we get connected and who does it, these are open questions, but we must get connected.
Excellent. Mr. Alex, how do you want to add this point, what actually Dr. William said, that especially I think that our policymaker, there are many policymakers, even when I discussing this point of views from Nepal, from Bangladesh, many policymakers actually watching your show, as well as they are thinking how they can implement these kind of things in a developing nations. So my point of view is that as sustainability and this kind of things is very important right now. And beside that, we are observing that many of the traditional things we already losing. Example, farming. If you see the Indian culture or even Malaysian cultures, even example Indonesian culture, farming once upon a time in a very big things. But at present, with the help of different kind of big corporations and other things, we losing this point. Even Singapore and Malaysia, they have highly dependency on the other countries. So in terms of the uh, like uh, adapting the innovative technology and this kind of things, how do you think that we can really focus on the agro-based technology, agro-based improvement? Even we can train the rural community, and we creating more job opportunity for the youth through this process.
Okay, so there's so many benefits to science and technology that helps around the world. Education is if education is systemic around our society, we would our economy would be better, we would be smarter, we'd be healthier, we'd be living better lives. Education is extremely important. That's why I'm so thankful that we had that last discussion. Technology is very crucial when it comes to solving a lot of the issues that we're facing around the world. When it comes to living sustainable and solving climate change, technology is going to help us stay connected, interconnected with what James was mentioning, and all of us communicating with each other, getting on the same level, getting on the same page with how we're going to address climate change, how we're going to reduce our collective environmental impact, and our environmental degradation, and just solve all of these things. Unfortunately, technology, if done incorrectly, has a lot of downsides and disadvantages. One of the huge examples is how we're using technology to create synthetic fertilizers and chemicals that we're spraying on all the plants to grow cheap food, and it's depleting the soils around the world. So some countries that used to be very dependent throughout, centuries, are now transitioning to chemical fertilizers and synthetic fertilizers that are derived from fossil fuels, and it's depleting the soil. So that's the short-term mindset of creating the cheapest food possible, making the most amount of money in a short time frame, and then it's depleting the soil so much that it's the soils now don't have the ability to sequester carbon in different countries around the world. So when we create jobs, when we work on the economy, when we talk about the economy and how we use technology and incorporate technology and science, we also have to think about the long-term consequences of what we're doing. So I try to promote eating organic, and I do promote technology in a lot of ways. And there's some ways that technology is going to lose jobs. So if you're involved in AI, artificial intelligence, if you're involved in technology, we're going to start seeing a lot more self-driving cars everywhere around the world. There's going to be a lot of benefits because we're going to have more land, less driveways, less parking lots, because there's going to be self-driving taxis everywhere. Those areas, we could then have gardens, we could have more land that's not covered in concrete. The downside is that it is going to potentially create less jobs for the taxi drivers, and so there's consequences. There's pros and cons of all of this. I do support, especially during this time, government stimulus and how that helps boost the economy. I also strongly believe in universal income as artificial intelligence, AI, and new technologies and automation, and the efficiency of the worldwide internet and more people connecting with each other and things becoming more efficient. And the universal income helps provide income to those that do not have those modern jobs in technology in the renewable energy sectors, because we cannot continue to do things the way that we're doing them in America. We're continuing to see more homeless people throughout our society. We're seeing suffering. It's like America's downgrading to a developing country with the poverty and the pollution that the homeless people are causing, and it's horrible. So I do strongly believe in universal income to a certain extent. I think that it's something that's going to help our economy, and I think that it would help with our long-term mindset. We have to have a long-term mindset. Like Dr. Williams was mentioning with the infrastructure and everything breaking down, that was our short-term mindset. So we have to think long-term, we have to think sustainable, and we have to think about the disadvantaged and the people in our community that are suffering because of the technologies and the transition.
Yes.
So
Yes, thank you, Professor
yeah,
Donald.
thank you.
Yes, thank you, Professor Donald. As you have a very good experience from academia as well as from industry, even especially innovative industry, what do you want to add for today's discussions? If the developing nations, if the Asian communities, they want to improve the job opportunities for the youth community, what type of initiative we can take? What's your guideline? What do you want to say?
Well, there's a lot of different people who have a lot of different jobs that need to get done, and I'm very big on STEM education. For instance, I'm on the board of a group that helps work for STEM education for women, and actually now we call it STEAM. So we add art to it. So it's science,
Cool.
art, yeah, science, engineering, art, and technology. Science, math, engineering, art, and technology. I haven't had my coffee yet, so I can't spell. But anyway, the point is, I think about that a lot, which is that it'd be great to go out and have everybody be able to do machine learning, but go to work doing machine learning. But man, that requires high-powered statistics and just things that some people aren't interested in. One of the things that I've always been most impressed with is what happened in Bangladesh when people started doing microloans for women. And women started creating all these amazing businesses, and it helped the entire country. In fact, anywhere, making sure that women get educated and making sure that women have the ability to start businesses it really lifts all the boats. So I think that if you look at education, that the type of education that was the most valuable would be for entrepreneurship, because as the world changes, there's a lot of talk. Okay, AI is going to take jobs, and it's true, but as long as people need something, there's something that people need. Somebody is going to figure out a way to get it to them and make money at it. And all the industrial revolutions of the past, the jobs have changed, but new jobs have been created. And I expect that'll happen again. Learning to read and write and having basic education for everybody is incredibly valuable. I mean, everybody needs to do it, and especially women. And having good university systems was useful as well. That's all I'll really say about that right now.
Thank you, Professor. Dr. Churchill, you have a very good intention to develop good policy, especially for government. These questions I want to ask both of the Dr. Churchill and Dr. William, because you have a very good expertise on the policy level discussion and policy consulting. And my question is that, if we want to develop a sustainable policy specifically for the educations and human resource development departments, what modern things we can implement in education as well as in the human resource developments and job creation area? What type of new things we can add? Dr. Churchill.
Thank you. First of all, thanks to all the participants. Very pleased to see you here on this weekend. And I wanted to also admit that it is always not up to the policymakers to support the job creation and any other economic development, but oftentimes it is up to the people who are going to themselves lift up both from the poverty level as well as from the unemployment lines. And I say that really echoing none other than Mahatma Gandhi, who actually said, that every human being does have a mouth and a belly that needs to be fed. However, it also has a beautiful brain, two strong arms that they can lift themselves up by the bootstraps. So I truly believe that it is only through education, first and foremost, into which we allow for the creation of the facility of the human being by instilling upon them the capacity to think and perform for themselves to meet their own needs, instead of creating a reliance on government, instead of creating a reliance on aid from abroad or internally. And most importantly, we have to get the young people to believe in themselves that they can perform the miracle of having a decent life for them and their families. And only then we can start talking about jobs. So I would say again, and again, education in its primary level, along with a sense of empowerment, a sense of agency of our own people, and clearly delineating that we should support our people away from reliance on others into becoming self-sufficient. And that goes for the country, for the community, it goes for the person, but most importantly, it goes for the family unit, which has to be always demonstrably strong.
Dr. William, yes.
Yeah, I guess on this point, what I'd like to do, and it's a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Churchill. I think this is true. I think there's a two-part thing that we have to at least keep in mind. And that is that education, I think we need a bit of a cultural change in terms of how we are approaching or thinking about education. Up till now, and Dr. Churchill, you're certainly correct with your emphasis on primary and secondary education, and then also what skills fit the young people. Some people are meant for vocational areas. Others are meant for different types of pursuits. That is true and important. But there is a significant development that's going on right now in the world, particularly highlighted and perhaps accelerated by the advent of this pandemic. And it's a real opportunity, and that is this. That first, with the advent of the internet, there was a real opportunity for a change in culture and approach to education, meaning that education is not necessarily a static kind of objective. That is to say, between the primary grades and or secondary, here in the United States being high school, and or post-secondary, meaning college, and then perhaps some graduate work, at a very important point in your life expectancy. But rather a notion that you can have lifelong learning, and that is through the usage of online internet platforms to connect students from around the world to the education they would not normally have an opportunity to connect to. And in that regard, we've seen with the advent of the pandemic, the shift to online learning, one, and then also this globalization and the need, as Dr. Churchill pointed out, the emphasis on education being such that if we combine that with a cultural shift, that learning and the educational culture should be lifelong, so that we retrain ourselves. It was true because Jimmy had mentioned earlier that at one point in time, at least in the United States, there was this notion that you got your first job, that'd be your only job, and that you would retire, and that in fact was the American dream. That is no longer the case, particularly with my generation, where on average, the person, the average worker, will go through anywhere from 5 to 6 to 7 different jobs over the course of their working career. That will all necessitate a common need to be re-educated, to learn new skills. And that's where the connectivity of the internet, prompted by, and Churchill, Dr. Churchill, I certainly understand, but prompted by investment from governmental policymakers to make the connectivity easier and spread more rapidly, combined with a change in the cultural notion and making it lifelong learning for people of all ages with all sets of skills. Now, there's a unique opportunity. I noticed, Dr. Sharif, that one of the viewers had asked us, and what would be the best strategies for developing nations? And in many respects, we often think of developing nations as being behind the curve when it comes to these things. In some respects, currently, it is a distinct advantage because they are not, developing nations are not necessarily stuck by the infrastructural molds that currently exist with regard to their countries. And rather, they can skip over all of the calcified structure that first world nations have. They can utilize the internet, and then with an understanding that they're building a new cultural approach to lifelong learning and the increased ease with the access to the internet, they can jump right to unleashing the creative talents of their people in a way that avoids the pitfalls that all first world nations are attempting to restructure under. But Dr. Churchill, you're right. Dr. Sharif, you're right. Jim, you're certainly correct. And Alex and Professor Staley, all of that's true, but it begins with a different approach with smart leverage of federal dollars.
Thank you. Professor Donald, how do you want to add, because there are some strategic approach coming for today's discussions. Based on your experience, how do you want to add?
Well, it really brought to mind my experience living and teaching and going to school in Finland, which is often right in the very top couple of K through 12 systems, and the university is free for everyone. And they have a kind of a different way of thinking than Americans do. Americans have a tendency to be kind of libertarian and have this view that that everything that happens is merit. It's done by your own effort. If you fail, you fail because you didn't work hard enough and you made bad decisions. If you succeed, you did it because of your great abilities and perseverance. But in reality, human beings are completely interdependent. We absolutely, everything that you have around you and everything of value you get from other people. And the Finns realize this, and they try and treat themselves. They believe that if you invest into the country, you invest into everyone. And so when that's one thing, that's an attitude. So their teachers are very respected. It's harder to get into teaching school than it is to get into medical school. And so teaching is an incredibly honored profession there. And they also, I really appreciate the idea that of not having baggage. I mean, a lot of first world countries or developed countries like the United States are very ossified. Anybody tries to change anything and people go absolutely crazy. There's this Common Core standards that they've had in the United States, which I looked at, and I loved the way they taught math so much. I re-taught myself how to multiply in my head, and it was great. Now I can multiply much bigger numbers than I used to be able to. But parents are up in arms because it isn't the same way that they learned it, even though there's brain-based learning now where we're actually educators, psychologists, and scientists are working together to teach people in incredibly effective ways now because we understand how the brain works. So Finland does that. So Finland dropped having separate courses in the school. The kids go to school for 45 minutes and then they take 15 minutes off, and it's absolutely a law. They do it. And the teachers aren't allowed to do work during those 15 minutes either. One teacher watches the kids out on the playground, and the rest of them have to go drink coffee and relax for 15 minutes. And so lo and behold, they learn way faster. They teach math by having the kids create a store, and they pretend to sell and buy things. And so they learn to be entrepreneurs. They learn how to make change in their head. They learn how to do math. And all these things are available for us to do. That does have to take place at a policy level. But I mean, a simple explanation that just actually baffles me why we don't do this in the United States is to look at places like Finland, say, what are these guys doing? What can we get from them that we can apply to our own country? Because it's not expensive. It's not expensive. I mean, hiring teachers is culture. In the United States, many people do not like teachers. They think it's a cheap, scummy, low class. That's what you do if you're not whatever. But in many countries, that's why I love having Asian students, because Asian people they respect teachers. And that's great. Whoa, I really appreciate it. So I think there's a lot of potential in Asian countries because of the attitude towards teaching and education in schools to do things less expensively by borrowing it from the most modern science that we have today, looking at places like Finland and working on making your education system. I'm kind of going on, but a lot of the countries like India and Pakistan and China, India had its educational system imposed on it by the British, and the old Victorian British educational system's probably one of the worst ways that you could do it. And the United States still has that to some degree, but it'd be wonderful to start seeing the countries use the knowledge that we have now about education, and you could leapfrog. It's really possible to do.
Yes. Thank you, Professor Donald. Actually, when you discuss, I can remember my father. My father died 2017, 7 December. So, every year, my father goes to my schools, and even when I was in university, he goes to university, and always he teach me fast. One thing, like in every time in your life, I follow my father's guidelines always. Like maybe you do not have any specific trustworthy friend for you, but if you have a knowledge, if you have degrees, and if you have proper education, this is your best friend. And second things, like from your teachers you get all of your educations, all of your learnings and these things, because he is your god, or she is your god, or something like that. So always he bring me to the universities or school, whatever it is. He say that that you definitely, I saw that you have Indian students and many things, that we always touch their feet and take their prayers, and we always love. So today's sessions, those who join, most of them like my teachers and mentors. This is very important for World Talent Economy Forum. So thank you. I want to go further with Mr. James and Mr. Alex, right? Like as you have engagement with the developing nations, different developing nations, even Mr. James has Africa, even Mr. Alex has involvement with this Nepal and many other country. So my question is that what kind of like area you think that this country can improve, especially in the pandemic situations? Like any area, do you have any advice that they can improve according to your experience from USA and the developed nations? Mr. James.
Okay, Sharif, I'm not sure that I understood exactly what you were asking me, but I did want to make a couple points before giving my best shot at what you're asking. One is that I was so relieved to hear that STEM is becoming STEAM, because I always thought that it needed the A, because chess can be considered a science, it can be considered a sport, or as I do, considered an art. And I think art is essential to any society if it's going to be a just society. And so I'm really relieved to hear that. And also to piggyback on the respect that Professor Donald was telling us about teachers, the respect for teachers, which can be non-existent in some locations in the United States, and marginal at best in others. This is the first time I was representing the United States in the International Governing Organization for Chess. A friend of mine came up to me and said, always refer to me as Professor X, because that has held in high esteem in the international community. And so I respected that, and I always referred to it in that way. But it was kind of a wake-up call for me that this was very important. Professors are respected elsewhere, that it wasn't necessarily the way I would have called him Tim. But professor last name was much more important and respectful. And so these are things that the United States, people who live in the United States are very much, as I was, unaware that this respect is appreciated and in many ways necessary if you're going to collaborate with other cultures. So my experience dealing with other cultures is to learn how to be respectful. And what they consider to be respectful may be different from what I consider to be respectful, and to learn what they think is respectful and to behave accordingly. Now, this is an important thing for someone from the United States coming into another culture to have it as a priority, to meet them where they're at. Don't impose where you're at on them. And so this is the first icebreaker between becoming a collaborator with someone from another culture, is to respect their culture, to understand it, and to behave respectfully across cultures. And then you have a dialogue. Then you have an opportunity to collaborate. And then you can find out what they actually need. They may tell you they need this, but you can see after you talk to them, after you work with them, that they actually need this plus this. And you can provide this and this to them. But only after you've worked with them and collaborated do you have that discovery. And then you know, hey, you don't just need this, you need that. You need this and that. And then we can start to make a difference.
Yes, Mr. Alex, what your experience you want to share, especially from the developing economy, like country like Nepal? What kind of experience you want to share with us?
Yes, so Sharif mentioned Nepal. I actually went to Nepal, maybe it was 4 or 5 years ago. I went after that major hurricane that devastated the region. I was there about 1.5 weeks after that major earthquake, and I was able to team up with a doctor. We rented a vehicle and we drove all the way out to the dirt road, onto the dirt road for a few hours, and then hiked. So we were in the earthquake epicenter in the Himalayan foothills, and he left me there after a day or two, and I was there for a month by myself, treating medical injuries and helping them rebuild. There was very little electricity, no cell phone service, and I didn't see any help from any aid organizations or even the local police for about 3 weeks after. But I was in this area and I saw how dependent that region was on the environment. I saw how dependent they were on the monsoon and the rain and the cycle, because they didn't have a lot of stores. They had little tiny shacks, and their economy was a lot different the way things ran. Again, it was in the Gorkha district in the Himalayan foothills, and they're extremely dependent on the climate, on the weather, on those cycles for their economy. So I guess that would be like some sort of sub economy, because how they bartered with what they grew, how they helped each other. I also liked how there was no homeless people. Someone always had a shelter, and how everything worked. I didn't have as much experience in Kathmandu as I did that very remote region, and I loved the lifestyle and how everything worked. When I talk about economy, I was also frustrated with some of the big companies like Coca-Cola and Doritos, and how I would see all this pollution. They didn't have any dump anywhere. They would just like throw it in a pile off to the side because they had no trash service. So all these companies that are using excessive plastic packaging techniques to sell their product make it up into these regions. The people in these remote regions somehow get money, trickling through their sub-economy, and then they purchase these things with no trash recycling capabilities. So that was upsetting. So I don't have as much experience with Kathmandu and the major economy. A couple years ago, I did have a chance to go to Europe. I was there for 6 months, and I traveled through 11 European countries, mainly the northern portion of Europe, specifically Scandinavia. I was in Finland for 2 months, and I was just blown away with the education system, the education of all the people, how intelligent everyone was, the wonderful conversations. And I specifically asked some of the people, like, why is everybody just so smart here? Why is education so good? And they just explained to me how the education system works. And I really valued that, because it's way different than in the United States, where we have both the private and public sectors, but education maybe is not as systemic throughout our society here in the United States. So I do very much value that opportunity to go to Finland and respect their education system and the overall mentality of the people there and their country. It was amazing. So I do want to mention about the pay. Like, teachers don't get paid a lot of money in the United States, and they're not respected as much as other countries. And I wish that they had more of the help, the resources they need, maybe better benefits and higher pay, because that's the long term of our society. That's the long term increases in a country's GDP, is the education. So again, that is long term. So speaking of long term, we could go back to the American dream, you know, the house, the white picket fence, the green lawn, but that's not sustainable. Unfortunately, we got there by extracting resources beyond Earth's ability to recharge those. Again, we got there by drilling for fossil fuels and doing all these things that were, in a way, like morally incorrect. It was bad for the planet, bad for the environment, but we did it so fast that we were able to make so much money to live that American dream. I'm not sure if we'll ever be there again. And part of me doesn't want to ever, for all of us to have that American dream. I think more people should become minimalist, live in a smaller house, live in tiny homes, own things that serve purposes, and value the things that they have, and have more things that are things that we need and we cherish, but not just things that we want. And we transition more away from a consumeristic society, buying cheap things that are made around the world. I hope more of the world economy starts creating things that are good quality, durable, and last, and they don't just end up in a landfill. I think that's very important. Another thing that I think that would help anyone watching this that's youth, and it goes back to answering Sharif's question a few moments ago, is not only just having access to worldwide internet. Smartphones are extremely powerful. They could change the direction of our entire society, of a country's GDP. So it depends on time management. If everyone's on their smartphone, doing Facebook, doing Instagram, playing video games, chatting with their friends, I don't know, all these other distractions people have on their smartphone. I knew this girl that was in Puerto Rico, and she also explained to me how she had her smartphone and how powerful it was, and how she spent a lot of her youth growing up with it and constantly just watching educational documentaries, YouTube videos, doing keyword searches, reading a lot. And she was able to actually get a very good education, put herself through school. She worked really hard, and she got out of Puerto Rico and made it all the way to California. So you can do a lot with your smartphone, but it depends on the time management, how you choose to spend your time, constantly trying to get good information, learn what you can, and try to expand your education, connect with people, like they were saying, with networking, and just don't, and try not to get distracted with all the other things, because they're so powerful. You could use it for good, or smartphones could really just dumb people down. So that's my advice.
Thank you.
And I think that would
Thank you. It's a very nice discussion. Dr. William.
Yes, if I could, I had a question for Dr. Churchill, and that is this. It's really a two-part question. It's this notion that right now we're coming out of, at least worldwide, where nations have been more nationalistic and more focused in and amongst themselves. Now, that combined with our stagnant economy, and that combined with our limited across nations. How is it, Dr. Churchill, that you are looking at the problem of, once again, reconnecting the world, and particularly in a smarter way now that assists developing nations rather than what was done in the past between our two nations, which was more colonialistic? And so we have frayed international relations, we have limited economic dollars, and yet we have an incredible need that both Alex and Jim and Donald have been highlighting. How are you thinking about it, at least from your vantage point, Dr. Churchill?
Dr. Churchill.
I would like to suggest that our thinking of the problem equates to the solution. Again, it's always by asking the correct questions that you can get to an advanced solution. And by mean advanced, simply that we have two examples in our history, both as country, America, and also as a people, which is the mosaic of everyone here, including people of all creeds, all races, all nationalities, and above all else, all economic strata and social stratification classes. So our experience has led that is the American dream. The American dream was not, as described by Alex, it was actually simply go out and make your own way, get a mule and an acre of land, build a shack, cultivate for your family the food that you need. Not just persist on making barren ground fertile, but dig in for the long haul so multi-generational development would exist. And this is what we accomplished in America. That is the basis of the American dream. It is not the Hollywood version, the white picket fence with the 3 Labradors, the 3 kids, and the perfectly coiffed and maquillaged wife. Absolutely not. The American dream is a dream of pioneering mentality, of finding barren land full of brambles that had never been cultivated, and digging in and farming and putting animal husbandry to work and creating relations with nature and your neighbors and splitting the wood and building a fence for your animals and building a home for your family and putting a nice fireplace with river oaks into which you can warm up your hearth and cook your food. So that is where I harken back. This is achievable easily by everybody if we just remember that in this dream there are no Cadillacs in the garage, there is no swimming pools and jacuzzi spas. The American dream is a dream of persistence in building a life. And this simple life that we can pull together. And you know how people can be very wealthy by minimizing their wants and their needs. I have no knowledge who actually said it, but I believe, it was Buddha who said that the wealthiest person on earth is the person that has a minimum of wants and needs.
Mhm.
So the American frontier and the American dream was built on the same way that every person on this earth can achieve, which is find a place that you can excel, whether through your education, whether through your capacity for labor, manual as well as intellectual, and create your place on this world unafraid, without judging yourself in relation to what you see in the Hollywood and the Kardashians, and the wealth, exhibited throughout the massive media means. No, judge yourself by the capacity that you have to achieve against yourself. Excel, because you can actually compete with your best self yesterday. And every day, through continued method of education and hard labor, hard work, we can persist in becoming better. This is not news to anyone around the earth. Human beings have been doing this for 215 million years. And from the time that we were in the caves, we learned to cooperate. And why did we cooperate? Because the animals outside, they were far bigger than what we were. And we needed to get together either to protect ourselves and our families or to fell them. But the fear always existed back then that, the saber-toothed tiger will get you in a moment without very much notice. And this fear, this stress, is what created the intellectual wherewithal within our evolving and enlarging cranial cavity to increase the size of our brain so we can start utilizing tools that would leverage against the fight against bigger and most dangerous animals. So today, that most of us, we have removed that fear of the furry creature with blood in its mouth, its incredible fangs and its huge teeth, the canine teeth that they're going to tear you apart. We have fallen a bit lazy, and we have lost the motivating power of stress that is actually one of the greatest motivators to push us forward. So I would suggest that perhaps we can recognize that in times of adversity, like we face now against this unknown enemy, virus, and against the difficulties of the economy and all these other things, it is this time where as humanity we will rise up and learn again to cooperate, This has been always, my wish for all nations. If we can cooperate with visible means by simply sharing the resources that we have on the medical issue, whether it be, most vaccine development or even the final vaccine product that people can develop it in their own countries, in their own communities, so we don't have the problem of transportation and logistical support, and we certainly take out the profit equation that the pharmaceutical companies will use to prevent the vaccine reaching the people that most need it, then we would be learning from our ancestors how to utilize our today's tooling, our today's innovation, our today's intellectual capacity to grow our brain and come to a place into which all together we can thrive and be unafraid of the big monsters lurking out there that seek, to tear us apart. That is how I see both the development of nations as well as the development of the individual in these difficult times. Cooperation. Share a little shed of tear for the ones who died and go forward to help the ones who are still alive. And say a prayer for all of us. And say a prayer because, we do not know how long we have on this earth. And it's not about the size of your bank account in Switzerland, I speak to the very wealthy who pretend to want to help the world. It is all about the fact that we are being judged and by the last moment on this earth. And we never know when that moment will arrive. So I wanted to say that if you don't know the moment of your death, and I speak now simply because I was reminded this week by the loss of a friend who, thank God, slept, and she slept eternally. She never woke up, and that must be a beautiful way to go. But I was reminded that because we do not know the moment of our death and our exit from this mortal coil, we should do our best today. And that means cooperate with others and give freely of what we have. And I wanted to close this by simply reminding everybody, there was a mystical monk living in Switzerland in the 9th century. And he walked upon the Alps and he chanced upon some builders, very poor builders, who were trying to connect two villages. Imagine, they were making a huge effort in the Swiss Alps to connect two villages over a very deep chasm and the river flowing below. And they were building a stone bridge. These were stone masons trying to connect two different sides of the mountain that they were impossible to bridge. And they were risking their very lives in building this incredibly high bridge every moment because a simple fall, it was guaranteed death. And this monk observed this, and his name was Notker, a 9th century monk. And he said, if this is our last moment on this earth, we best remember to be swift in love, easy for kindness, and knowing that our legacy is now. So I want all of you to share this as this moment because we all experience pain of loss. We all know people who die and died unjustly, prematurely. And I don't just speak about the epidemic, I speak about in the regular course of life that this happens throughout the world. So I would invite you to go to this blog of mine, and I'll put it down here again, and hopefully you will see it, www.beb.mobi, and just read this little piece that I wrote, because this is my prayer for the world. My prayer is that we can cooperate on the vaccine development openly, unfettered, and without any economic motives. Because at some points in humanity, seeking to save our lives, that we do not know when they will end, none of us does. Absolutely, I assure you. Let's show our finest hour to be today, in the face of this stress, in the face of this epidemic that can kill any one of us and all of us if necessary. Let's show that to be our finest hour by cooperating, and let that be our legacy, that we did not seek to make vaccines to make money and make our population healthier than the others, safer than the others, or smarter in some ways, thinking that we've got an advantage. That is not the American dream. The American dream was people cooperating, and if they didn't have a mule, especially during the period of the Reconstruction, after Abraham Lincoln emancipated the slaves in our country, and we all became one somewhat, the ones who were lucky enough to get the mule and the acre, they shared the mule and the implements of tilling the land with their neighbors in order to be able to provide food for the community. And that's how we build resilient communities, rich communities, and I am proud to be an American because of that legacy. This is the true story of the American dream. Cooperate, share your tools, share your intelligence, and like our good friends, the Amish people, if you need to build a some kind of barn, or a home, you pull together the whole community and you can do that thing in one weekend. It doesn't take, to build your own home in a space of 3 years. That is the level of cooperation that I seek today in the creation of the new vaccine, because we know that certain countries have had the vaccine for months now and they haven't shared a single dose with anybody else. I'm calling out China and Russia, and I'm saying that the vaccines they have proven to be effective. Why do not share it openly with the other people? It is not a time to seek economic, military, and certainly public health advantage. This is not the time to pretend that we are going to displace the other people from the top, position of this earth. But if anything, it shows that you are lacking compassion, you are lacking charity, and certainly you are lacking any wherewithal that can bring you up to be the #1 country in the world. That behavior should not be rewarded. So if you have a good vaccine, that works, share it with others. And I don't mean produce it and share it. Don't take it away from the production you need for your citizens. Simply give us the genotype and put it out on the internet in an open source and allow everybody else to manufacture it without, having to pay you either royalties or having to buy it from you. So I suspect that, if anything, in this difficult time, we have come to a realization of what it means to be human. And I would go back to that old monk, Father Not Care. And if you read what I wrote, I think you will see that be swift to love. I think that will take care of us. So I want to leave you all with this idea. Let's love each other a little bit more. And let's say a prayer for our people, because these are difficult times. And difficult times require, this sort of coming together in prayer, not just for our safety, but for our cooperation, for our sharing the resources that we have. And this would be the only way that we can evade the saber-tooth tiger, called epidemic and Wuhan coronavirus or COVID-19 today. The threats will always be there. It's not time to fall on the couch and watch Netflix forever. It is time to rise up and go and find the ways to share the vaccine development. If you happen to work with any of the entities, just put it out on the internet. We created with Sharif a simple thing called Vaccine Wiki, or rather known Wiki Vaccine, and through the offices of the Environmental University on the Public Health Department, we would like to share this globally so we can make a true human knowledge-based development. Those will be the tools of the future to address the enemies of the future. This is not going to be, the last epidemic we will face. If anything, it portends to be one of the most nasty ones to be followed by many others. We have to rise up. Let's get together. Let's get on with it. God bless you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Churchill. Dr. Williams and Professor Donalds, what's the analysis you want to give? Especially Dr. Churchill, he has a big visions and something he wants to contribute for the global community. So, Dr. William.
Oh, actually, I was going to defer to my esteemed colleague, Donald. I'm more than interested in hearing what you have to say first.
Okay. Thank you.
So
Yes,
what
Professor
exactly was the question? What was
yes,
your question?
no. My question is that, like, what do you want to give the analysis, especially for Dr. Churchill, because you want to develop something which is very unique. Number one, vaccine for everyone, wiki vaccine concept, life science universities, and he also gives some analysis on American Dream.
Well, I think that he's talking a lot about a kind of a almost a ideological view of America. I mean, it's a long story, but America was actually quite a large degree founded through slavery. I mean, we didn't basically people from England came that were used to being property owners who couldn't have property. They've got horrible property. I mean, the Virginia and Chesapeake Bay and the areas where they settled, people were dying constantly of malaria and cholera and everything else. They were horrible places. And so they found that they could buy people from Africa to go out there and develop their, develop it. And so, I mean, that's a long, long story. So we do have, you know, this kind of myth of the American frontiersman. And, you know, my family came here in 1635. One of my great long time ago grandfathers was one of the first people to start in Maine. They sort of founded Maine, and they founded another branch of them, sort of founded Long Island, and then eventually they came to California. But so my family wasn't actually slave people; they were Northerners, so they didn't own any slaves ever. And but
I just wanted to interject that this is a very good elevation of history, however, on a negative standpoint. The most positive standpoint is we just had a Thanksgiving holiday in America, into which the first colonies, as we well know, from Europeans to America, they perished. The environment was inhospitable for them. They were not hardy enough. And it took the native Indians to save us and support us for the few years until we established strong communities. And when I was speaking about the elevated American dream, it was exactly about what you're saying. After the emancipation of the great Abraham Lincoln, when every black slave was promised a horse and an acre. And because
but
the
they weren't
emancipation...
given it. They weren't given it. They were
and that is
promised
why I said that the ones who were given, they shared. So I was speaking the story of the black people, and that's how they created vibrant communities. I'm not here to resolve any grievances with the past. I'm going to resolve the grievances of today, because if I keep living on the past and I keep looking at life through the rear view mirror, I will never get to a positive future for all of us. My people are all the blacks, the yellows, the greens, if you will, you know, and everybody who lives in this country. And I'm going to look to the future. How can we come together? If you seek to divide us again by remembering your people as being non-slavers and the others as being slavers, I apologize, but I must tell you, everybody benefited from the benefit of
I know.
labor. Everybody, your
I'm
people, your ancestors, yourself. And at some point,
not
you have
saying-
to pay some kind of reparation. At some point, you have to admit that and say, we will pay the descendants a certain level of reparation, not only because it's just and moral, but because that way at least we can lift them up a little more and try to equate the scales. However, this is off the topic. The topic is how can we cooperate without division, no separation of creed, color, and race into a beautiful future.
Definitely. Dr. Churchill, definitely. Professor Donald will discuss on, give him chance.
Yes,
He
yes, of
definitely decided. Yes. Sorry, Professor Donald, for interruption. Yes.
That's the idea that people just do things by themselves in the first place, it makes no sense. Human beings can't exist without other human beings. Everything around us, if we look around, I point to these, you know what they are, you know their glasses. I know you're going to know. Human beings have a shared reality of the world that allows us to use language, because language wouldn't work if the words in the situation that we use language in didn't if we didn't have a shared reality in our mind that we can talk to, because we're mostly talking about abstract things. So we're talking about the past. Well, the past's gone, but you and I, we can talk about it, and we all have different views. You seem to have a very, to me, you seem to have a very, I don't know, idealist. You have an ideology, and it's got and to me, when you say that I'm talking about divisions, in fact, I'm actually pointing out that you have to realize that these things are there and acknowledge them and talk about them and see them and see thing in order to be able to start working or dealing with them. My assumption is that we're together and that we're one. Like, human beings are created by their relationship to other human beings. I don't even believe in such a thing as a person. We're constantly reinvented. Like, if one of the you often refer to various religious traditions. In the Buddhist tradition, in Theravada Buddhist tradition, we're recreated every moment, and so we're constantly being created by our situations. And so I think it's right now that in the United States, there's people like our president and soon to be ex-president Paul Ryan and some libertarian thinkers who have a view. They're very much against governments. They really want to end the government. But yet, when we're talking about doing something like having an educational system where we can educate women in cultures where women aren't traditionally educated, and we're looking at things like changing the educational system so that it's more like Finland and things like that. Those are all things that have to be done from the top down. An individual can't do that. So if we try to do something within the government and we don't acknowledge that people are created by their situation and start helping people start changing the situation so that people can actually have equal opportunity, they won't. There's a wonderful book called The Long Shadow, and it followed 800 white kids and 800 black kids in Detroit for 50 years, from the time they were in kindergarten all the way until they became adults, well into their adulthood. And they found out that just because of the connections, the social networks, the white kids had, they wound up doing better than the black kids, no matter how hard the black kids worked, how good they were, how honest they were. It was when they first wanted to get a job, the white kids had an uncle or something that would hire them. But the black kids, it took them longer. And if every delay, your education takes you an extra few years. Getting your first job takes you an extra few years. All these things added up to the life paths of these people so that you could see what happened. So to me, in the United States, we don't address that. We like to believe that, oh, well, everybody's, it's all their own hard work and it's their own merit, and all you have to do is make the right decisions and everybody succeeds in America. But America's like second to the last in social mobility of countries in the world. I mean, of developed countries in the OECD, second to the last. I mean, America is a mess. And yet we have people talking about the American dream and how everybody, gets their 40 acres and a mule or whatever like that, and everybody has the opportunity to be successful. It just isn't true. So that's what I'm saying. And I would like to see. We need to change that. And I think people are younger people especially, and the ability because of the internet and us to talk to people and understand people. I think that more people are, and I also want to say that's something that's kind of my mission, is trying to get people to understand how incredibly connected we are to each other, that we absolutely are one. Human beings are like an organism.
Yes, Dr. William.
Well, I guess just some thoughts. I tend to agree with both Dr. Churchill and Professor Donald Steiny. I guess the issue is simply this for me, and it is part of the trend I think that was raised is this notion of are we in a phase in world development, or at least in development here in the United States, where there can be a significant change? And on that point, I do want to just begin with this, and that is here in the United States, and Dr. Churchill, you were right. The first part of your quote is, any idiot can tear down a barn, but it takes a village to raise one. And so you're quite right about that. And in that regard, Donald, you're absolutely right that, this era of cooperation. And what I harken back to is this, is that fundamentally, and what you touched upon with regard to the younger generation, they have grown up so far in an environment and a culture where America has not been this hegemonic power. And so what they are looking at it in terms of both their upbringing, who they see in school, who they associate with, they are looking at it as a multifaceted mosaic, a quilt, if you will, of their surroundings. And as a result, their foreign policy and their view of the world seems to reflect that need for cooperation. Now, oftentimes it seems to me that as we begin to look to the rest of the world and the developing nations, and as we move away from an imperialistic kind of historical approach to the world, at least for the United States, or a colonistic-based approach to the world with all the sins, including slavery that resulted from all of that, that we are rather in a position where we have the unique opportunity to provide for at least a policy of enlightened engagement. Meaning that when you talk about, Dr. Churchill, you mentioned that there are certain countries that just refuse to cooperate, either with vaccine knowledge sharing or platforms or the interconnectivity. All those nations that are fighting against what is the natural, I would argue, this status of being a human being, which is to cooperate together in order to survive. Because that really is the way that we can advance, not only individually, but as communities, but also as nations. And so this idea of enlightened engagement, and yeah, we are going to be facing in the future these recalcitrant nations that continue to fight. However, they are not necessarily what we should be focused on. We should be focused in on those nations and those people that are like-minded around the world that understand the sensitivities and the needs and the viewpoints of developing nations, because they have the largest number of people. They have the largest amount of untapped intellectual potential. They have the greatest resources, both in raw materials and human capital. And so it's to the extent that what first world nations, so to speak, can provide for them are the resources, the understanding. If we take a different approach, no different, and they often say this, out of the mouths of babes comes the most wise of things. And it could be true that we need to look to the students, our kids these days, that are growing up in a multifaceted, mosaic, multi-demographic society, and how they cooperate as the basis for all of our collective foreign policy, which would be enlightened engagement, cooperation, because eventually those nations that are fighting against that are hoarding because they think that by being nationalistic or tribalistic and hoarding and being amongst themselves is the way to go, they will eventually find out that they will get far more by joining in. And to the extent that they continue to refuse, for example, like North Korea, they'll find themselves in particularly dire circumstances. And the gap between their achievement and what they can do on their own and where the rest of the world, even the lowest of the low in the rest of the world, is still staggering. But you're right. We need a village, Dr. Churchill. Donald, you're right that we need the kids in a mosaic viewpoint. We need to be progressive. Alex, you're right that we need to leverage human capital and intellect, utilizing all of our modern technologies. And Jim, you're right that, looking at it by that approach. But we do have to drill down to specific policies. How are we going to work for common defense? How are we going to work for peace? What steps can we make, even if they're minor steps, that bring people together? Now, there are going to be differences. Everybody argues. There's no way around it. I mean, perhaps, Jim and I may have an argument from time to time, but that's not necessarily indicative of a barrier to the future. And so in that regard, I think it's systematic, tough questions with an approach that says that this is where we've got to go. It may not be easy to get there, but that's where we've got to go.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Mr. James.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to respond. This is a very interesting and necessary discussion that we're having here. And it is important to focus on our similarities rather than our differences, because we do have more in common than we do not. And I wanted to say, as far as idealism goes, hippie has become a four-letter word in our culture now. And I unabashedly call myself a hippie because, the lines were smile on your brother, everybody get together, you got to love one another right now. And that has stuck with me throughout my life. And the arrogance of my youth, yeah, I thought I did everything myself by my strength of character, my will, my intelligence. But I didn't fix the cavities in my teeth with fillings. Someone else did that. I didn't cut my hair when I had hair, and someone else did that. And so there was always somebody helping me, and I was just ungrateful and not acknowledging that help. So now we have to go beyond that. And I'll talk a little bit about what my father taught me. My father's presence is eternal, but he's no longer on this plane of existence. And he and all my uncles and my father, they all went to Ivy League schools. That was expected. All my aunts and mother, they went to sister schools. That was expected, so that they could marry somebody from an Ivy League school. What my father taught me was that don't go to an Ivy League school. You're a Roman Catholic. You won't make those connections that the Protestants will make. So don't waste your money going to an Ivy League school as a Catholic. Now, this is just one example of all the ways we can divide ourselves. Division is easy, but the connection is difficult. And we must focus all of our energies on what keeps us together. What are our similarities? Focus on them. Those are the things. The other thing he taught me was don't wait for someone to teach you something, teach yourself. Now, this is what we want to do. We want to provide the opportunity of people to teach themselves. And that opportunity involves connectivity. And in this case, in this age, in this globe, that connectivity is through the internet. And we must connect everyone, because then they can teach themselves. We can provide them access, but we can't teach them. They have to teach themselves. Now, this is a wonderful, wonderful discussion. I'm proud to be part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Alex, yes.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I want to add. So as Dr. Churchill was talking about open source vaccinations, not only do I think that's important, that would help alleviate suffering and save lives, I also want to commend and mention Elon Musk of Tesla has a lot of his designs, his schematics, his drawings, and some of his work with his batteries and the new technologies that he's helped develop. He has that open source, and he allows that to become open source because he also realizes we're all in this together. He's a strong activist when it comes to climate change, addressing climate change, and collectively reducing our carbon emissions. So he allows a lot of his designs, or possibly all of them, to be open source, especially with battery technology, because he wants other people to use his technologies, his battery technologies, to make electric cars and also make them more efficient. So I really respect what he's doing with that. And as Dr. Churchill was mentioning, if they did that with vaccinations, it would help the countries that don't have the means or technology or resources to create vaccinations on their own, or do the research and the steps necessary to create that. We haven't really talked about capitalism as much. There's different structures of how countries run their economy between socialism and democratic socialism, capitalism. So as we here in the United States are a capitalistic country, and there's so much, and there has been so much mass consumerism, we are continuing to see the divide between the rich and the poor grow. We're seeing a lot more homeless people around the United States, and we're continuing to see the rich get richer. It's just incredible the amount of money that some of the richest people in the United States are making, and then we're continuing to see more homeless people. So since we are in this together, I think there's a lot of ways that we can close that divide between the rich and the poor. Some of that comes down to politics and how we tax the rich. I think that throughout history, the rich used to get taxed a lot more. At this time in the United States, they're barely taxed. They're not taxed as much as they have been in the past. So we're continuing to see the rich get unimaginably richer and more homeless people. So if we continue to put more money, I think, towards socialist programs, not just having police, fire, first responders, potentially universal health care, but just maybe there's like I don't know, there's like food stamps or Section 8 or housing and veterans programs and things to help the less fortunate people among our society. So we're not just letting them suffer. And I think that would help the economy altogether in the long term if we did have certain programs, socialist style programs that taxed more of the rich and took some of that money and helped out some of the less fortunate. I think that would help close the divide between the rich and the poor. It would bring us more together, and we'd be working collectively more. Throughout these conversations, I haven't heard mention of a circular economy. That's also really important when it comes to sustainability. A circular economy has to do with manufacturing products that last a long time, are durable, stronger, and we use them more, and they just don't end up in the environment. It has to do with taking materials that are recyclable and taking them back, creating new materials, and then putting them back in the economy as a good. Also, just we're wasting so many resources, and our landfills are full. We're seeing pollution everywhere. So a circular economy would help us become more sustainable. It would help us focus more on what's important. I think it would give us more respect for ourselves if we lived in a clean environment, if we had a circular economy. And I would recommend for anyone to do more research, like I wish I did before this discussion, about a circular economy and how that would help us in the long term, how it would reduce our collective carbon emissions. In the last video we did a few days ago, when we spoke about education and how important that is towards economic growth in the long term, I also mentioned the Bureau of Labor Statistics website. I just want to mention that again because that also has a direct correlation with the economy. That website is Bureau of Labor Statistics Occupational Outlook. It's a really good website that talks about where the jobs are going to be, where they're projected to be, how much you can make working for a specific job, what the hours are like, the benefits if you need an education to fill that job position. So it's a really great resource in the United States. All of the information is collected from census data and statistics and everything else. I'd recommend checking that out. I just want to say the word, I heard Dr. Churchill mention resilience. A resilient culture or country, I think, is dependent on programs to help the people that are going through economic hardship, that have a loss in the family, that have a chronic disease or illness, and different situations that would limit them. So I think that's something else that America should, maybe with this new administration, that will help our economic growth here in America with the money that they're putting towards some of those programs and potentially a stimulus package. I noticed in one of the questions, a woman asked a question: how do you measure the economic growth in an underprivileged country? And to answer some of those, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. There's a couple different ways to measure the economic growth. One of them would be the GDP. And that's, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, that's the gross domestic product, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So that's one way to measure the economic growth. Another way is how many jobs are being created and what the unemployment rate is. All of those statistics are available online, or they should be for your country. You know, you use Google, you search GDP of the country. You can see charts and graphs if it's increasing or decreasing. You could also do that with jobs. Here in America, when we have, our commander-in-chief, our president, they base his progress and his success off the country's GDP, off the jobs, and the unemployment. Another way to notice is if you look at maybe the infrastructure of a country. Is it increasing in quality or decreasing? How's the electrical? How do the roads look? How is there clean water? Is there growth? Are you seeing a lot of new construction projects? That's one of the ways to see the economic growth of a country. And also social programs. Are they helping the less fortunate people in the country, or is there a large percentage of homeless people, people suffering and struggling with food insecurities and water insecurities? So wanted to answer that. And that's some of the input that I have for this conversation. So, thank you.
Yeah, if I could add really quickly, Alex, the thing is that for those nations that don't necessarily have an equivalent to our Bureau of Labor Statistics,
Right.
they can actually go to the International Monetary Fund, because the International Monetary Fund has reports on an assessment for each nation around the world. And so even if your home nation does not keep those kinds of statistics, paths, jobs, development, GDP, etc., the International Monetary Fund is a great centralized, unbiased, objective place to find and see how at least they are objectively measuring the growth in your own country. Just thought I'd add that, Alex.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Thank you.
Yes. Professor Donalds and Dr. Churchill, especially what actually Mr. Alex and Dr. William trying to add about the IMF report, as well as the growth of economy based on GDP. Even I want to be more prefer on the gross national productions, GNP. So what do you want to add in terms of GDP growth and more employment opportunity creates, and what kind of strategy we can take, and definitely sustainable strategy? Professor Donald.
Okay. First off, it's interesting that they've started to come up with new metrics for economies that factor in quality of life, and they're starting to look at new ways of doing it, because economic growth doesn't tell the whole story. As Alex pointed out, basically the difference between the extremely rich in America and most people is growing like very rapidly. And so we can look at the economic growth in the country and go, oh well, that's great. That's really nice to see that Bill Gates and made so much money this year, but it doesn't affect the rest of us. When you look at countries that I think are very successful, like Finland, which has been the happiest country in the world for years, it's got education for every healthcare. People don't have to worry. They've got a really entrepreneurial culture. I mean, they're just constantly forming cool new businesses. They commercialized the cell phone. It was Finland that did that. And so when I teach there, I'll teach adult learners whose job became redundant. I mean, technology changed, so what they did wasn't useful anymore. The country arranges for them to, besides just getting unemployment, they also retrain them, or teach them how to new skills. I mean, it's just so sensible to do that kind of stuff. And how does that work for any individual wanting to know about their country and the biggest opportunities in their country? And it's all I can say is that it's worthwhile to keep in mind that just the GDP doesn't really tell the whole story, because if you've got a country like America where people are working 2 jobs and 50-hour weeks and 60-hour weeks, I mean, in Finland, when I was working there, they said, well, it's time for summer vacation. And I said, well, that's okay. I have a few more questions on this project I'm working on. And they said, no, you don't understand. This is summer vacation. I'll talk to you September 1st. And I mean, that's it. They just stop working. It's wonderful. But there are places, you have to Google it, but look at happiness indexes. There's other kinds of indexes that I think you should keep in mind besides just the gross national product. You should also look at the separation, like, you know, what percentage does the top percent own versus everyone else? And you can start filling out some ideas of how healthy the country actually is, because a developing country wants to wind up like Finland, not like the United States.
Oh, okay, great. Well, not quite. I think a lot of people want to be like the United States, with all due respect, though. So, don't mind me. I happen to like it here. I don't mind Finland, but I have.
I like it here too, but we're doing extremely poorly on many of the metrics for quality of life.
No, I totally agree with you, but I that as an opportunity to get better, not as an opportunity to move out. So I'm like, I'm just going to improve the Western.
I'm not saying that I want to move out either. I'd like to see us get more like Finland, learn something.
Yes, I totally agree, and I think when Donald gets those tickets, to move to Finland, I'll be the first one to come and visit. Donald, I'm not making fun of you. Your desire to live in Finland is manifest.
I never said that. I never said that. I
trust me, my friend. You've been saying it for as long as I've been knowing you, in different words, not exactly those words. And I said I spent time there, and I like the country very much. But the time that I spent there, I chose to educate myself about a country that suffers tremendous rates of drug abuse and alcoholism. Of course, they need a good healthcare system to take care of the overdoses. Tremendous suicide rates. They are very terribly depressed. And I found out the best people living in Finland.
You just make this shit up. Like last time we were here,
there you go. Okay, just chill out.
$1.2 billion, but 1.2 million people committed suicide, and I went and looked it up in Nature and stuff.
Well,
and
today we have an even better statistic for you that might cause you, to flip out again. Look at Japan. In 1 month, they had more suicides this month than what they had deaths from the whole COVID epidemic in 1 month. So, I know you don't like to believe that people die.
I'll look it up, but I don't. I'll look it up, but I don't believe it. Fox
do not speak
News is not a good place
do not speak before you look it up. In 1 month, Japan had more deaths from suicide than the whole COVID epidemic in the whole duration of the lockdown.
1.5 million?
In 1 month. So, no. Let's not.
1.5 million?
He says he last time I was on it, he said that 1.2 million people in the United States had killed themselves because of
related to COVID, and that includes the overdoses.
But that is not true according to Nature, Journal of the American Medical Association, or any.
Donald, you choose.
And if you look it up on Snopes, what it is it's something that some right-wing nutcase website posted, and it went around on Twitter and shit like that, and it's absolutely absolutely untrue.
No.
Please, the point that somebody has lost their knowledge in the debate is when they start going on ad hominem attacks. Donald, do not do ad hominem. This is what you are doing, and you're stopping now. I'm stopping you because otherwise I will not participate in a discussion with you ever again. Do not insult people. Just look that in 1 month in Japan, more people killed themselves.
Yes,
and that does not include overdoses. In 1 month. In America, when I spoke of 1.2 million, shut up for a moment. Contain your enthusiasm.
Please.
1.2 million includes the overdoses by fentanyl, carfentanil, and narcotics, opioids in the United States. And those I consider suicides as well. So it is not something that came out of Twitter. It includes the overdoses from the easily obtainable opioid drugs, and especially fentanyl and carfentanil. And okay, you can check all you want, but I'm not speaking about that. I would go back to the question that we were discussing, which is most pivotal here. And that is, what is the use of finding a good country of Finland with less than 10 million people that nobody can migrate to because they have very good closed borders and they will not allow you. And they have a vast population of underserved people. If you look at Finland, we have, tremendous people, the natives, for example, with whom I spend time on the track of none other than the wonderful animals that they measure in the tens of thousands, and they are nomadic herdsmen people, and they travel freely through the border into Siberia and beyond. And these northern people, the ones who are native, very much like the Native Americans, and they maintain part of their sovereignty by not recognizing the national borders of the Scandinavian countries and the old Soviet Union, today's Russia and Siberia. They're the ones who are truly happy in Finland. All the other Finnish people, that they take so much pride and equity in all of their highfalutin achievements, I assure you, I didn't see much happiness there. So I would leave that right, because this is my personal opinion, okay? And it is done by spending time there. But when we spoke about good education, I found the best school in the world to be, because I did my research for 2 years all around the world, China, India, Scandinavian countries, European countries, Latin America, and Africa. The best educational system that I found was in the highlands of Costa Rica, in a little school inside the rainforest, what we call the cloud forest of Monteverde into which the community had come together to create its own school. And the majority of those people, they were actually refugees from America. Other people in a different time that they wanted to leave America because they were not happy here, as you are not happy here. And they went to Costa Rica as a minority, and they found a piece of land and they bought it. And they worked very hard out of the rainforest to create farms and to put some nice cows. And they chose, Longhorn Indian cows for whatever reason. And they started getting involved in the production of milk and butter and cheese and yogurt. And that's how they created a living. And they created their own school for the children. And they made a deal with the government that they will teach it in a bilingual way, both English and Spanish, but they will do it without any government interference. They will not accept interference like Common Core and all these other government-led down, initiatives that, if anything, dumb down the system and all the children, but they would do it by having tremendous parent-teacher involvement. And because they didn't have money to get professional teachers, it was the parents who did the teaching, and they were all involved. And because they didn't have money to have many classrooms, it was one classroom into which all the different ages, they cooperated. And that is today the best performing school in the world, without government support, without government money, not from America or from Costa Rica. And most importantly, more than 99% of their kids, they have a peak of schools to go, both in the Latin-speaking world, in Spanish world, or in America. They go to Harvard, they go to Stanford, they get multiple letters of acceptance from the top schools, including scholarships. These are not wealthy people. These are not people who are beholden to a government to tell them, to make them all the same with a common core knowledge, and they don't have, so many drug issues or any problem. And these are the people whose parents, they are involved integrally in the school. So it's not only on the PTA meeting, it's every day that they show up either as teachers or as volunteers. And I searched high and low to find the best system, because I am interested in policy proposals. I'm interested in developing our country in a better system. And I assure you, after about 300 different schools that I personally experienced by sitting in those schools for a day in each one of them and learning everything about them, this has been the top one. So this is not statistical. It doesn't come from Twitter. This comes from my personal own experience in my search to create a better educational system for the country.
No,
and they don't speak Finnish, sir. They speak English and Spanish and other languages.
I'm a scientist, and anecdotal evidence and opinions are not a lot of value to me.
Okay. Well, no. General, I think the point here is that, and certainly it's enrollment on both sides. However, what we do is we find ourselves...
A scientist who uses ad hominem attacks against people, not a scientist at all.
That wasn't... You're taking these things too personally. I'm attacking your ideas, not you personally.
Okay, well, here, listen.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Dr. William.
Sharif, it seems to me that what we've got right now, and this is the creative dynamic tension that we find ourselves, which is one of the beneficial outgrowths, if there is one, from this year that we call 2020. And that is that we're at a global inflection point where contrasting ideas can come together, and we can actually entertain these ideas about how best we move forward. Because our system has been shocked in a way that has caused us to fundamentally reevaluate. And whether those ideas are challenging our old educational notions, the schools, health, the economy, we're at an inflection point. And what we ought to be doing now is collecting all of these ideas and allowing them to debate and fight the ideas amongst themselves so that we can honestly move forward in a way that the world has never had this kind of opportunity before in the past. That's what it seems to me. So I welcome the creative debate. I dig the exchange of ideas. And quite frankly, not that it's a plug, but here in the United States, I mean, this is why we fight. We fight over ideas.
Indeed.
And
we choose also to respect each other, and with a bit of love. And when we try to make ourselves a little happy, I say to you, especially to Donald, be swift to love. Show some companionship, for your comrades here on the same battle. Show your kindness. And I understand that you're depressed and upset over this epidemic, but do take some chill pills that they can easily be found, in your local supermarket. They're called Pop-Tarts, and they're called chewing gum, and they're called all kinds of other things like M&Ms. and you would be much sweeter, when you are involved yourself, in conversations. But for the time being, let's admit the reality.
You mean if I gave myself diabetes?
The reality, we all made a diagnosis about you, sir. You don't need to be a medical doctor to figure out you're having issues. But solve your issues without bringing them to us.
See, now you're sitting here.
Hey, you guys, come on.
Well,
we got other people watching.
You're just sitting here.
We have other people watching.
Chill out.
Come on, you
Chill out,
guys,
my
everyone.
Let's
Get
chill out.
back on the
Let's
subject.
Alex, it's Alex.
It makes for an interesting conversation.
Can you just mute them?
Yeah.
Can you just mute them? We have like other people that are trying. We're trying to provide educational material to our
That's what
viewers.
I
It's
said.
not
You're
about.
sitting here insulting me.
The best school that I
Yeah,
found.
this just needs to stop.
Doctor, can you mute him?
The people
Yeah, just mute
been
all of
able
them.
to choose their own
Alex.
educational curriculum by involving their own parents into the curriculum across grades.
Dr.
Right?
Church,
That's all.
I appreciate it. No,
Thank
I absolutely appreciate it. Alex, you were going to say something. I'm listening.
Yeah, it's just that's bad content. We got a lot of people watching that are depending on us and Sharif to put on a good program. So we probably just went to from 100 people to 3 or something. So back on
people
point.
love arguments, actually.
Or maybe 3,000 because it becomes interesting and not boring.
Probably got better.
Okay. So we're turning this into a drama like the Trump administration. This isn't a TV show.
Go ahead, Alex.
So I wrote some notes.
Yeah, please.
Yes.
Okay, so
Next time we should call Kim Kardashian to join our group. I think we'll win.
Dr. Churchill, give some chance to other speakers.
Alex.
Then it will be very effective.
Okay.
Yes, Alex.
Alex.
So this discussion's about economic growth. Now we're generalizing a lot of things that we've been talking about. We've been occasionally specific about a certain country. When we're talking about economic growth, I think it's also important to realize, I don't like saying this saying, but not one shoe fits all.
Right.
So we got to focus on what country we're talking about and what economic growth is going to help that country, because there's different resources from different countries. Some countries might be focused on lumber, other countries on technology or sand, mining, minerals was a huge thing. When I was in the Middle East, there's a lot of extraction of minerals. So depending on what resource or goods or services that country is good at or focused on or has in that country is going to change the direction of their GDP and the future. So back to resilience. Our world's changing. Our world's changing because there's ecosystem collapses around the world. There's increases in ocean temperatures. We have coral reef die-offs. We're having increase in acidity in the ocean. We're also seeing more superstorms, more disasters, more forest fires in forested areas. So we're going to continue to see these disasters affecting different countries around the world. So I forgot to mention the rise in ocean sea level that's going to be affecting Bangladesh in the following years, in the following decade. So it's not just about the resources, the goods, the services that these individual countries are focused on, where they're directing their efforts and what's going to help their countries become successful and the quality of life of all of the individual citizens of those countries, but also to become resilient, to look in the long-term future. What are some of the threats that they're going to face in the future? How could they become more resilient towards those threats? I know in America, every year there's hurricane season that constantly is affecting, Texas, Louisiana, Florida, and some other eastern states. There's, the Philippine region and other regions. So just knowing what disasters are going to be worse, how they can become more resilient, how they can implement certain emergency preparedness strategies and different ways they can design their economy to become more resilient. This is going to be extremely important in the future as we continue to see our biosphere break down, as we continue to see economic uncertainties. So just becoming resilient is going to be very important. And I can't even emphasize this enough. We are going to see more disasters in the future. So becoming resilient is going to be very important. Donald was mentioning a couple of programs ago, and he semi-mentioned this time. There's that the program that helps women that people can donate to, but there's also, I believe it's Kiva. And I remember my mom donating to this about 15 years ago. It's been around 10 at the very least, but probably 15, maybe 20. It's been around for a really long time. So Kiva is a program that people can donate to, and it helps people in developing countries get loans to start their own business. And it's unbelievable. Last I checked, the rate of all the people paying back their loans because they got the initial investment that they needed to create their small business or start their business with their family and their friends. And it's been extremely successful. It's helped out a lot of people. I haven't looked at the latest statistics, but that's something that I would recommend if anyone is watching this program that has the financial capability and the willingness to help people in developing countries. Kiva is a great organization. It's helping a lot of people. Those are some of the main topics that I wanted to discuss on, and hopefully we can get back to point and then continue to do a program that's going to help people, help our economy, and help make the world a better place.
Okay, well, actually,
So, thank you.
on that point, I just simply want to point out that not only are you correct, but there is a different pressure point. And that is right now, for example, in various countries like Venezuela or Brazil, that what they have is they have a wealth of natural resources. They have a dearth of human capital. And the governments there are in a pressure cooker because on the one hand, they have to provide those measurables that we discussed earlier, GDP, production, wealth, societal wealth. On the other hand, we are telling them that they have to do it in a responsible, sustainable way. Now, oftentimes the critique from third world countries is, well, that's great for you because you guys have already, extracted all of your resources and gotten your wealth. But we don't have that yet. So why are you lecturing to us about how we ought to be using our natural resources when we want to get to where you are? And we are in the challenge of essentially being hypocritical because we have to say to them, well, essentially, do as we say and not as we've done. But I think the pressure cooker that you pointed out, Alex, is that we've got to at least through perhaps enlightened engagement, talk to them in a way that we regain some sense of authenticity and explain to them that they can have both. They can utilize responsibly the natural resources they have in order to elevate the general economic standing of their countries, but they can do it in a way that avoids the calcification of the various infrastructures of first world nations. And at the same time, they can reach prosperity without destroying the environment. And it's really our responsibility now to be the ones to say to them, yes, we did wrong. We have to acknowledge we did wrong. And leveraging and leadership, our money and our policies help them get to where they go. But make no bones about it. The countries are in a real pressure cooker. Because on the one hand, if they don't raise the prosperity level, rather quickly, they face revolution. On the other hand, if they go too far in the other direction, all they're doing is what we see with the Amazon rainforest. They're just clear cutting without any regard to the future impact. And that is a very, very tough struggle. And quite frankly, here in the first world nations, we are in no position really at this point to kind of lecture them. I mean, it's almost comical, but we do. But that is a burden that we have to share, and that's a burden that we have to bring. But you're absolutely right. But let's be clear about this, that they are in
a really good point.
And it's either war and revolution on the one hand, or devastation of natural resources in order to reach prosperity, which is a short-term goal. And that is something that I'm more than willing to listen to anybody else talk about.
Yes, Professor Donald.
Correct.
Yeah. What's the question? Sorry, I didn't.
Yes,
I don't. Go on.
Okay, Dr. William, can you help him? Because
certainly. I guess, Donald, I guess the question is, Alex raised this notion that with developing nations, they're going to have a whole different set of resources. Some will have timber, some will have coal, some will have minerals.
Sure.
They face a dirt. Okay, but how do we do that? Only because the immediate need to raise the prosperity in those nations is only confronted by what we now know are the long-term dangers if they do it irresponsibly. How do you help third world nations navigate that?
There's a thing in economics called the resource curse. Right. And what winds up happening is that when a country has resources, it gets controlled by a small number of people. And that small number of people wind up then having political power, and they basically screw everybody else. Right. And so the history of humanity doesn't give us a real good pointer to doing that. I think that Alex is always talking about voting with your money, but as long as the United States is going to be wanting to buy oil from Venezuela, Venezuela is going to want to dig up the oil and sell it to us, or anyone in the world. I mean, and as long as the world is wanting to do it. And in India and China, they've gotten big enough that they've really started to realize that the environment and quality of life are part of important for political stability. But it's hard. You get to some place like Venezuela, and I can't really even think of any way.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Dr. Churchill, like one point I just want to add, because World Talent Economy Forums, we have very strong collaborations in offline. It's our 12 years of journey. The 6 months we are trying in online basis. Please, dear respectable speakers, try to understand, like, this type of content. It's not only Facebook Live. You can trust me. I can give right away the evidence. Many university chairman, even I think Professor Donalds, Alex, last week you meet with Mr. Savur Khan, chairman. He even emailed me that our content will be universities' educational content. Try to understand. 30,000 students will listen our discussions.
Thank you. And this is wonderful. Yes. At the same time, in these difficult times, we must also appreciate the power of levity and humor, yes, and drawing some smiles in our faces. And don't be sour pussies, like some of us tend to be all the time. Let's lighten up. At the end of the day, like I said earlier, we are all going to die. None of us gets out of this alive. So if we take it too seriously, we just might drive ourselves to an early grave. So, I would suggest to my colleague, put a smile on your face. Don't frown and scowl, because that defines you. But if you smile and you say, well, they all saw, when you smile, the world is smiling back at you. So I am waiting for the day that I see a smile on the Donald's face. And I don't mean just this one Donald. I also mean the other Donald in Washington, D.C.
Professor,
so, my point would be, yes, in this particular, to conclude and now to speak a bit more seriously, is my grandfather inside the parliament, oftentimes, he would crack these awful dark English jokes. And the joke would be sometimes when people, he would bend over laughing at the expense of his colleagues, and to cover it up when they ask him, why are you bending, Churchill? What are you looking for in the floor? And he said, I dropped my lollipop. Ha, 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 ha. So, today I dropped my lollipop a couple of times, and I apologize for that. But I'm going to get back to my jujube later, and I'm going to suck that sucker, until it has a big smile on my face. And I suggest to my colleagues, there is no better remedy, when you're upset, to just get a lollipop, and suck on it until, the sugar increases in your bloodstream and you start feeling better. I also recommend that as a remedy to all of my women when they get upset with me, terribly saddened and upset, and they start pouting and screaming, and I pass them on a lollipop. And, it's amazing, the medicinal benefit of the lollipop, as you all know, since children, we had them. And to this day, I use them a lot, contrary to my dentist's advice, who says, you'll destroy all your teeth, with those suckers that you put in your mouth every day. I say, well, the benefit I get out of them, far outweighs the damage that I have to come and show to your office so you can drill my teeth, and get rid, of whatever facility exists. So again today, I say let's lighten up our life with a little bit of sugar, and I know it's against health medicine, support, but never mind. I'm just suggesting a lollipop to each one of us who are suffering the effects of depression and worse.
Yes.
And because we need to wake up and understand that a bit of smile, a bit of love, and that swiftness to coming to love with kindness and humor. And if anything else, humor, is the antidote to our terrible situation today. Humor is the
Yes.
antidote to the depression that comes from the lockdowns. And of course, the people who crack all the jokes, they're the ones who are not going to commit suicide. I assure you, unlike our Finnish fellows, and all the other Scandinavians who are known, for just medicating themselves with alcohol and then jumping off the nearest bridge. I know, I live in Seattle. We had the #1 suicide bridge in the world. It's called Aurora Bridge. More people have died jumping from Aurora Bridge per capita than any other place on earth. And every year or every 10 years, they keep increasing the height of the barrier, to prevent people jumping. And the people are very entrepreneurial. You see ladders left against the barrier that the people have gone. And of course, the ladder stays behind. And some simple people, they come and they take away the ladder. And then they know they have to start searching for a body, somehow, in the waters. It's very unfortunate to know that we have tremendous capacity of killing ourselves. The Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, is a famous destination for people who want to end it all because they're depressed. And I say, let's put on both ends of the Golden Gate Bridge and in the middle, free lollipops, for everybody. A bunch of free lollipops. And the same thing for Aurora Bridge. Maybe at the last moment when people are so desperate, they grab onto a lollipop and they start sucking the jujube out of it, and they might change their mind. Because we need to spice up our life with a little bit of sugar. And these being the holidays that are difficult times for people who are alone, sequestered under lockdowns, especially on the American states, such as the West Coast states, that are under orders of the government to not be able, to socialize, obviously they are suffering a lot. We recognize that. I am one of the people who live in those places most of the time, but I also get to travel, and I see the beauty around the world. And I must tell you that happiness is not an achievement of wealth or social policy. I see the poorest people around the world being the happiest among us. I see the people, as we discussed earlier, of the simple, tiny, and very, very, very poor state of Nepal, and the state, that has a lot of happiness among its people. And that's not divorced from the fact that a lot of these people are faithful meditators, adherents, to the Buddhist cause, and obviously, people who pray a lot. And the same thing would go to Bhutan, which is a very small state, and by many reasons, probably the happiest, where almost 20% of the people there involved in religious activity as nuns or monks or spiritual people. So I would suggest that a bit of spirituality gives a bit of happiness and a bit of understanding to the greater dimensions of our life. Not everything is about this body. Not everything is about what we can touch with our finger and prove, that it exists. A lot of the things are existing that they are metaphysical. And it's those metaphysical things that I believe we should invest ourselves into in order to understand life better, not just on this realm, on this earth, but also beyond. As I said, I might sound a bit metaphysical because I was saddened by the death of a couple of my friends, one of them being the economist, Walter Williams, who was actually one of the leaders of George Mason University in the other Washington, in Washington, D.C. And he was a very brilliantly happy person. He was a fighting happy person. He was a person who obviously always drove himself to happiness because he said it is a choice. It is not something that anybody can give you. It will not arrive through social policy. Government is not going to give you happiness. If anything, they're going to make you upset with the rules and regulations. But what happiness he got out of interaction with people, the freedom of association. And this is what we've been denied during the lockdowns. The most basic human right to come together, the freedom of association that allows us to cooperate. And that causes a lot of people to be terribly upset, terribly depressed, and to even drive themselves in animosity against others who happen to be a little bit more lighthearted and a little bit, more willing to say, well, that too shall pass. And at the end, we're all going to die. So, don't sweat it too much. You might die earlier or later. So screw it. Let's live today. And let's live with being loving to each other, kind and compassionate. And I know this doesn't sound, very scientific, but I assure you, kindness, compassion, and love, they gladden the heart. And when your heart is gladdened, that's how you become healthier. That's how you grow. That's how you become more intelligent. And that's why other people are attracted to you. The reason why I have millions of people attracted to me is only because I crack a lot of smile. And of course, I say a lot of stupid jokes. Not that anybody really laughs at my jokes, and they want to laugh most of the time. But at least the other people are entertained by saying, look at this fool, with his self-deprecating humor, Obviously, he's smiling, so let's smile in sympathy. So what I wanted to ask kindly today for my colleague and very much a wonderful person, Donald, is please smile in sympathy with me, not in hate. Don't try to tear me down. Don't try to disprove what I say. Just smile.
Thank you.
Smile in sympathy. And that will make all of us, smile more.
Yes,
So,
Dr. Churchill.
I know we will laugh, and I'm going to leave you with a simple. I'm going to leave you with a simple joke. When you take people seriously, like the great Buddha or Jesus, we forget that they also used humor as a way of opening up people's hearts. Because if anything, humor opens people's hearts in those difficult places where we are all closed up. And I would say no more except the parable of Jesus when he invited people to smile simply because they didn't have enough food. And out of the not enough food, they were able to sell. So
Thank you.
That's my
Thank you. I directly want to go for the concluding remarks. I start with Professor Donalds, then Alex, and finally Dr. William. So thank you for today's discussions, World Talent Economy Forum with the help of Asia Research and Development Institute and Al Noor Academy. We are working, and I thank you everyone for joining today's discussion. It's really, really very impactful discussions, and I request that all of our content, as much as possible, we are sharing with university, school, college, governments, politicians, NGOs, millions of people. We have a target in between 2021 we will reach. And already many of the universities, they are taking our content as the example. So I'm sure that hopefully you will be a very important brand, at least in Asia Pacific, with the collaborations of World Talent Economy Forum. So the more you come up with the scientific research, scientific informations, effective information, it will be helpful for our students, because try to understand, you are dealing with the youth community, those who will follow you. You are a hero for them, right? So this is the things for today's sessions.
And I wanted to go because I have another appointment, but I wanted to leave you with two words. One is love and smile best you can. And God bless you all. I hope we keep the discussion. Very pleased to meet you. God bless, and the best of holidays to all of you. I'm so pleased to be with you and also to share. Remember, Father, not care. Live today, love sweetly, share your kindness, and gladden your heart. God bless you. And again, enjoy being with you. All the best.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, Doctor. Yes. Sorry, Professor Donald, for concluding remarks. Yeah.
Oh, well, I will say that I think it's very important, since it is an academic thing, and we are working with students, that we take the time to actually check what we say and make sure that it's accurate. It's not reasonable to be able to start just making things up. And that was something that got me a little bummed out. And actually, as Alex will tell you, I'm one of the friendliest, nicest people that you could possibly meet. And I'm very happy and outgoing and funny. But it does bother me when people just say things that aren't true. So for instance, what he just said about the suicide rate in Japan being higher than COVID, well, that's kind of bogus, because Japan managed to make COVID be not a problem. So they have very, very, very low rate of COVID deaths. And Japan has always culturally had a very high suicide rate. It's something, it's one of the highest, it's always been one of the highest in the world. So what he just said actually was meaningless. And so anyway, I don't want to go just and pick on him, but overall, I think it is really, it brings up something that I think is really important with education and everything, is that we're living in a world where we get information that's disinformation. It's information that's crafted in a way to try and make you come to act a certain way and believe a certain way. There's And that's one of the difficulties with the internet. It's all well and good to say that you can search YouTube for videos and you can, there's a lot of information that's available, but with education, one of the things that we really need to be able to have people to do is have what I'll informally call a shit detector, which is the ability to look at the information that you're getting and be able to decide in some sort of a way whether that information is accurate or not. And we really need to teach people the tools to be able to have judgment so that they can basically have a good idea of what they're hearing, of whether it's true or not. We're faced with an avalanche everywhere in the world. The Russians and the Chinese and the Americans, everybody are just putting out untrue things. And so I think when we talk about education, that could be a whole topic on itself, disinformation and how that's affecting us. But
yes.
so, yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Alex. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Real quick, misinformation and disinformation, like Donald just said, can have some very serious repercussions on a society, on a country. It's been used to create wars around the world. So knowing the difference between real information, news, and misinformation is very important. I think one of the best ways to know the difference between misinformation than real information is, so throughout our life, we're raised. There's information everywhere. So we become intelligent people by not only just getting a good night's rest and eating healthy, but by having good mentors, good educators, constantly getting good information from good sources, whether it's YouTube videos, YouTube documentaries, Netflix documentaries, from good teachers, from reading a lot, from observing nature, observing our society, and having a lot of intellectually stimulating conversations with smart people. So the more information we have throughout our life, and the older we get, the wiser we get, and the wiser we get, then we're able to differentiate between misinformation that's being spread, and if somebody says something that just doesn't make sense because it doesn't fit in with everything else that we've learned throughout our life. There's so much misinformation being spread throughout the internet that's having repercussions on the political system, with climate change, with wearing face masks, with who did what. It's just, so it is important to try to keep yourself open to information, but try your best not to spread misinformation. We do have access to Google. You can click on the wrong thing. Just try to know the difference between a legitimate source of information and an unlegitimate source of information, because it causes a lot of problems. Throughout this conversation about economic growth, we covered a lot of important subjects, but we didn't cover anything specific to this very important subject. We didn't talk about the consequences of countries trying to increase their GDP, trying to create a product or a service, and utilizing child labor. So we need more international groups, like maybe the United Nations, watch groups, different organizations that are trying to raise awareness of that. Also, people in America, if they're voting with their money and buying the wrong products that are supporting child labor, that's also something that we have to be vigilant of. Not just child labor, but it's also working conditions. How the psychological damage of someone working in a sweatshop or being exposed to chemicals and pollution. We need to be concerned about that, because it's not just about having a good economy and making money. It's also child welfare, the welfare of the people, and the quality of life. Are they getting paid a good amount? Are they not being safe from chemicals and pollution, or any type of psychological problems when it comes down to that? So also the welfare of animals is also concerning when you just try to produce a large volume of meat to raise animals in the cheapest, fastest way, feeding them low quality products and food sources. So conditions and all of that. So there's different ways to avoid this by supporting the right companies and the watch groups. World pressure, good PR, bad PR, without spreading misinformation, but raising awareness of the companies that we shouldn't be supporting that are using some of those practices is something to to know about and do research on, and it's just because we don't want to be supporting bad companies. So we did mention, again, voting with our money when it comes to the world economy. It's really important, and we do need to support the green shift towards green technologies, renewable energy, technologies in the medical fields, maybe that's stem cell research, nanotechnology, things that are going to help us all live a better quality life. So voting with our money is really important, and hopefully we can transition away from single-use plastics and some of the products that are destroying the environment and create things that are durable and lasting longer. We also, just to summarize everything, infrastructure is really important. Just building infrastructure that's going to last a longer time frame than just a short-term fix. And those are some of my notes. Again, thank you very much for the great discussion. I hope our viewers benefited from what we contributed. And again, I love the panels that you've been putting together, Sheriff. So thank you very much.
Yes. Thank you, Alex. Dr. William, I request you for the concluding remarks. I just want to add one point. We want to reach 1 million students. It's not only internet. It's really, we have practical relationship with the universities, with NGOs and everyone. And we are already start to distribute it. So I request all of our panelists, what that Alex has actually discussed today is about the real informations. The more we get the real informations, these students will be benefited. These universities and these research centers and the organization will be benefited. And I want to ensure you that all of your contribution will create a very good impact. Very good impact. We are doing really hard work. These 2 hours or 2 hours 30 minutes of your times maybe change hundreds of thousands of people lives. So Dr. William, for today's concluding discussion.
No. Listen, one, I appreciate that too. Listen, I love the panel, and I also love the give and take. I guess I'll just take a step back and begin this way. You know, when I was young, I used to wake up every day and I think, how am I going to change the world today? Now, maybe I was naive then, or maybe not. But when I wake up these days, I think, hey, how can I change the world today, given the fact, you know, where we sit now after in society? And one of the ways is through talking and discussion panels. But more importantly, for the students out there, or those who are casual observers of this program, just listening to Alex alone, all of the areas that he cited make this probably, some might say, the most dangerous time in American history or world history to live in, but others might say the most dynamic and promising and optimistic time. Because think about it, whatever your interests are, if it's the environment, you can make a difference. If it's technology, you can make a difference. If it is infrastructure responsible, you can make a difference. If it is uplifting poverty, you can make a difference. The ability for one person to have an impact across this globe, given today's technology, I'm not going to say it's instantaneous, but it is darn near close enough to that. The barriers to starting a movement or spreading an idea are so much smaller now than they were in the past, which on the one hand means development can happen faster. Now, some people will say, well, development is always good. That's not necessarily the case. Sometimes people say development means bad things happen faster. But what this program is, and Sharif, what the World Forum does, and for the university students, I mean, I think that you're being small in your goal of 1 million people. We have 4 billion people on the planet. I don't know why we shouldn't talk to all of them. But the point here is that they can, in the blink of an eye, with little or no barriers, follow their passions and make the world a better place. And so, taking their optimism, their energy, as we see around the globe, and the engagement of ideas given the internet, online, and access to the experts such as Alice and Donald and Dr. Churchill and you, Sharif, and all of the other members that you have on your program, is infinite. And I'm fundamentally optimistic. So I find it to be a happy time. I say, let's wake up tomorrow, all of us, and just think again.
Yes,
how are we going to change the world today? Now, personally, today I can tell you this, and I apologize. today I'm trying to work on it. Can I change my own diet? Can I, eat less pizza and more oat? But that's a small thing for me. But the rest of the world, let's get up, be energetic, and let's figure out how we're going to change the world by talking and communing and sticking on the subject, of course, with laughter and sticking to the facts, Donald. But that's what I have. I'm optimistic, Sharif, and thank you once again.
Yes. Thank you. Basically, we do focus on SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals. Let's say today we discuss about decent work and economics. We will continue it. Year long, we will continue it. Maybe we are missing some points. So next discussion in between two hours of time, 2 hours 30 minutes of time, maybe we sum up the point we are missing. But example, definitely in the next week or after 2 weeks, these things will be filled up by our discussions and this point. And why we targeting the 1 million people? Because we are focusing on quality of work. We do more focus on quality. We can create few minutes of things, few minutes of videos or these things. It's actually not change human lives. And the reality is that it's my I know all of you are very experienced. It's my experience to meet with different kind of people and developing different human resources, that we have to engage with people. We have to, like, 2 hours 30 minutes. Those who want to learn from the different culture, let's say from Bangladesh, let's say from India, let's say from Indonesia, they have to understand each and every points, and they can get your experience, then they can understand your knowledge. So now everything very fast, with few minutes, with 10 minutes, with 7 minutes, people want to, let's say for finishing my PhD, I have to extend 3-4 years of time. So I do not know how actually few minutes of things it would be resourceful, but our objective is that we want to focus on research. We are doing really industrial consultancy, as well as we will develop real contents with the help of our like contributors, and we are developing a scientific committee. So when you send your CV, right away we add in our scientific committee, and we are very open because we have many requisitions from the different universities and the governments and the policymaker. Today I get a proposal from another country. They said we want to develop a university for our agriculture. Okay.
Right.
Yes, some for our agriculture. I get another proposal that one university said that we want to put all of your content for our students. So we are taking different kind of things. So your unique idea, your unique thoughts, your unique proposal, I'm sure we will try to reach the root level, the remote areas people. And this is our objective. Not only the discussion, we want to take more initiative. So hopefully in between 2021, we will be more organized, but we need all of your support. Professor Donald, your experience is very important. Dr. William, your experience is important. Alex, your spirit and your energy, very important for World Talent Economy Forum. Next week, we have many interesting discussion. I will invite you all, and thank you, our honorable guest, and many more things. They are observing, they are commenting, and they are texting me, emailing me. Thank you for all of your support. Thank you for your valuable time.
Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's always a delight.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Take care.